Welcome to Direct Approach, a bi-weekly podcast hosted by Wayne Moorhead, filled with timely insights, fresh perspectives, and actionable takeaways from your direct selling executive peers to help fuel the growth and evolution of your business. On this episode, Wayne is joined by Gordon Hester, CSO of the Americas for PM International. Gordon is a direct selling veteran, lecturer, consultant, and author with over 3 decades of experience with an emphasis on strategic development, analysis, and sales. Gordon will share PM International's remarkable growth story and explain the strategy, culture, and philosophy that fueled this explosive, consistent growth. And PM International is a leading authority on growth. It sits at number 6 on the DSN Global 100 list, with 2023 revenue of $3.03 billion and has enjoyed sustained year-over-year growth for an astounding 30 years. So if you are looking to next level your growth, you will find all the insights and takeaways you need to start your own success story on this powerful new episode of the Direct Approach podcast. But before we begin, we'd like to thank this episode's sponsor, PayQuicker. Your business moves fast, but is your money keeping up? PayQuicker's award-winning solution lets your business make payouts across the globe instantly. Send payments to over 200 countries and territories in more than 80 currencies through PayQuicker's secure API, with funds available to spend immediately. PayQuicker is a fully customizable white-label payment platform, allowing you to offer branded debit cards, instant virtual cards, global bank transfers, mobile wallets, cash, and more. Plus, you get their bank-grade security and global compliance coupled with multilingual account support so you can focus on growing your business. Start paying your sales force instantly with the largest global payout provider to direct selling organizations. Because faster payouts to your distributors means they grow their business and yours faster. Learn more today at payquicker.com. Now let's welcome your host, Wayne Moorhead, and his guest, Gordon Hester.
Hello and welcome to another episode of DSN's Direct Approach podcast. As always, I'm your host, Wayne Moorhead, and today's guest is an industry veteran, lecturer, consultant, and author with 3 decades of direct selling experience. He's worked on both the operational side as well as the field side of the channel, and now leads sales strategy for one of the largest and fastest growing direct selling companies. I'm excited to welcome Gordon Hester, Chief Sales Officer for the Americas at PM International. Gordon, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Wayne, and thanks for the invite, and thanks for the kind introduction.
Of course. Yeah, it's so great to see you. I love chatting with you and seeing you at all the events, and I'm excited for today to dig in a little bit deeper on what you've been up to the last few years, the impact that you're having there. So we were fortunate several months ago to interview Mr. Sorg, and the PM International story is truly inspiring, and I've really been looking forward to digging in deeper and hearing more insights, especially as it relates to the US market. But before we get too much into that, can you share a bit about the path that led you into the direct selling channel?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about my background. So this is year 35 for me. So I've been at this for a while.
Congrats.
Started on the distributor side, worked for a lot of years with a gentleman, and together we built one of the top 10 largest distributorships. So my initial experience for many, many years came from the field side, which becomes really important to understand how the business model works to make the business work. In April of 2016, I retired. I found out quickly I don't do retirement well. So 4 days later, I was approached about heading up a modernization initiative with one of the large US companies. And that led me into a consulting business that I had for 8 years, basically helping companies to transition to be competitive and relevant in the marketplace. At the same time, I built a technology company with my son, Connor, called Shape Tech Solutions. And Connor's now one of the largest vendors in the industry. So those years kind of were fun years. In 2016, I certainly recognized things were going through an evolutionary stage that could be challenging. So felt like with all this success I had had and all the impact I've been able to make and seen other people make, it was a good time to kind of get plugged back in, initially on the industry side. And then back in early 2022, I met Mr. Sorg. He happens to also live in Sarasota. Our offices for the Americas is here. We met through a different circumstance, actually became friends, and it evolved into a conversation about joining PM. and helping them build out the Americas. So that started in May 15th, 2022. And here I am 2 years later and busier than ever. That's for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. Such an incredible background, such incredible insights that I know you're going to share with us. And I know from talking to so many others, that distributor perspective allows you to really have incredible insights and advantages that others. I never served on the distributor side or the field side. Even though I've kind of spent my career trying to understand the field and the distributor mindset, I've never walked in those shoes. And I know that that's always been a disservice. So I know that's incredible that you've had that opportunity and have been able to bring it to so many companies, whether in-house or through your consulting and now into PM International. And you talked about the evolving time in direct selling. And that's something that in today, I know I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper and get those insights, because it is changing so quickly, so rapidly. The fundamentals are still the fundamentals, but how we do it and a lot of the tactics that we use have changed so dramatically over the last few years. So being at PM International for the last couple of years, it is one of the most successful and inspiring companies in direct selling for me in recent memory. Year-over-year growth for 30 straight years. It's operating in more than 45 markets. And congratulations, it recently crossed the 3 billion in annual revenue threshold, which very few companies have ever achieved. So with all this and more, I'm excited to get your perspective and the US perspective of PM International. I'd love to get some of your first impressions. What were some of the things as you joined PM International that immediately stood out to you as maybe important or different from some of the other companies you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, so I think the first thing was just the success story. In that, in all my years, at the time it was 33 years in direct selling, I had never come across any company that had consecutive growth every year since they started. And obviously the last 4 years have been much more of a faster growth. So it took PM 26 years to get to $1 billion. In the last 4 years, we went from 1 to 3 billion. So you can imagine that comes with its opportunities and challenges. So I was really curious on how that was possible. And for me, I'm kind of maybe old school in understanding that all sales comes from somebody buying a product or service from a direct seller. So I see things very much from the consumer side. So for me, the first attraction I had was the products. So I tried the products. I had just remarkable results. I could see the difference. I could feel the difference. Matter of fact, this weekend I weighed in and I've officially lost 50 pounds since I started. So,
wow,
and a lot of that has to do with the products, but also it helps change. It's a catalyst for change. And that was a good thing. I think the thing that really impressed me the most was Mr. Sorg. So I kind of believed, especially in doing the change management, that the fate of any company ultimately lies in the hands of the ultimate decision maker. So clearly, Mr. Sorg understands this business model. He was a distributor, a very successful distributor, moved into having his own company. He sees the world through the eyes of his customers, and our distributors called team partners, through the team partners. And our philosophy is stay in momentum and do everything we can to support our team. So he was obsessively committed to direct selling and network marketing. He is unapologetic about that. He is more excited about the future of the industry than anybody else I've been talking to. I think there's a lot of concern right now. But it's a different story here. So I was really attracted to the products. I was really attracted to him. And then the other thing was, as I got in, I started recognizing the culture, and I shared a lot of values. Like, I believe this is a momentum business. So building something in momentum is an amazing place to be. Also, coming into a situation, because at this point in my life, everything is about how I make a bigger impact. This is sort of my final masterpiece kind of thinking. So I needed to, if I was going to do anything other than consulting, look for a place that I could really build something that I would be proud to be a part of. So the goal when I came here was to turn the Americas into $1 billion market, similar to what we have in Europe and Asia Pacific, but it's very early in that journey. So I think when I look at it now, we are seeing growth in all our KPIs. So we're kind of going the opposite direction of the industry, but we're very much, our distributor base over here is primarily foreign leaders that have come in or built teams here. So I have a very heavy team partner group that speak Korean, speak Mandarin, have a large Polish community, a large Amish community. We've seen a recent explosion in our Hispanic community. But interestingly enough, I would say we're very, very early in the other two groups that I would tend to see in the US, which are the Anglo market and also the influencer market. So when I look at all this, I see massive opportunity to grow. As I said, we're so small in the big scheme of things. But I think the other thing that really attracted me is Mr. Sorg wanted to build a headquarters in Sarasota, Florida. So I live in Sarasota. It was convenient. He's making a very big investment. We're actually getting ready to settle on a piece of land and build a large facility here that will be sales, logistics, and light manufacturing. So basically a center to serve all of the Americas. And then we also in the States we have 2 logistics offices. I have 2 offices in Canada and also 2 down in Latin America. And we just opened an office last week in Vancouver. So we're expanding, we're growing. But I think it was really the belief in Mr. Sorg. I've worked with most of the leaders. I've never been more impressed with a leader on how to build a company, a debt-free company, family company, a company that stays in momentum, a family that built a very stable business. So it gives us the ability to invest a lot back into the business to stay relative and competitive, which, to be honest with you, is a huge advantage in the marketplace today, because as people struggle, they don't really have the money to invest into change. And, so the timing was right. The opportunity was exciting to me. I had immense belief in Mr. Sorg and the product. So I rolled up my sleeves and went to work. And that's where we are today, 2 years later.
That's awesome. That's an incredible story of how you joined. And there's a lot I want to circle back there. So one, I find it's really interesting to have the growth in the US initially being fueled from those international team members, those leaders coming in and building out those communities there, which again, those have some momentum in and of themselves. And then you've got the job of, those that were domestic here to kind of grow that. I think that's really interesting. I want to get back to that.
Yep.
You did mention culture, which is definitely something that PM International is very known for. Rolf has built such an incredible culture over the years that's really known for, as he and other people have talked about it, kind of this balance of heart with high performance. Combining those two things creates something I think really unique. How have you seen those ideals live so beautifully together there?
Well, I think the philosophy of heart and pride is something that he's instilled into the culture. He understands that part of inspiring people and for them to see a vision of how PM and Fitline as our product brand can fit into their life is really, really important. So knowing that he believes that when your heart and pride is connected to something, then you have a stronger inspiration to continue to build. It's the same thing. It's like a mission that you're living every day, a purpose. And he classifies that as heart and pride. And it is something that is not just words on a wall here. It is very clear. People in PM, our distributor base in particular, love to share our products. They see them making a difference. And that's why the business opportunity really works. The high performance goes back to how Mr. Sorg runs the business. And I will tell you, I think there's only 2 types of cultures. There's political cultures and high performance cultures. So if I was to say a political culture, I would tell somebody it's generally defined by 3 things: entitlement, drama, and division. So I think when you go down that road, you can have moments of growth. You don't usually sustain growth, because with those factors becomes other challenges. Could be like entitlement. People don't want to work. They just want to get paid, whatever that might look like. So his focus is always impact and revenue. There's a simple philosophy here, and that is that there is never stability without growth. So we stay focused on growth. Our conversations are about growth. Our planning is around growth. Our innovations are around growth. I'm trying to think if I've ever had a discussion that wasn't about growth. And then on top of that, it's growth in direct selling and network marketing. So we are not omni-channel. We do not compete against our field, and that is a cultural value. Even when I've had conversations with Mr. Sorg about potentially doing some lead generation, the first thing I get back is, I'm fine with that as long as the leads go directly to our field. So he's old school that way. He believes that when you support the field and you give them the right opportunity and the right products, good things happen. So I think that's a huge advantage he has. And then on top of it, he was a guy that came from direct selling, and that was an important factor for me. And I think that factor has been confirmed so much in the last 3 or 4 years, as we have seen more equity companies coming in, as we have seen more traditional management at the C-level, which is all fine. They bring skills to the table, but where are their loyalties and where is their understanding of the business? So I tend to find that although we're data-driven, Mr. Sorg has very much of a people-centric approach. He understands people. So when he looks at numbers, he just doesn't blindly lose how people are impacted by those numbers. And I think that's a big cultural value of just staying in that lane and making sure that we live these values every day. I would say those are the core that really stick out to me. I will say we are one big family. Like any family, we have our moments, to say the least, but I think the teams work really well together. And Mr. Sorg is very, very supportive of growth. So he's making a lot of investments into the Americas in particular, the US being the biggest of the group, to ensure that it is the next large PM market.
I love that. That high performance culture is definitely something that we hear a lot about in regards to the company and the culture. I'm curious, it's a little easier to instill culture in the corporate side where there's a little more, I'm going to call it command and control. That's the wrong term to call it, but you have a little more impact more immediately with an independent sales force. How has PM International been able to successfully instill those same values and that same culture in an independent sales field with your team members?
I think they are preached in practice, so the behaviors are nothing new. One of the lessons I learned from my change management days is usually when culture falls, sales falls. And losing trust in a culture really impacts the sales and the growth of a culture. So, Mr. Sorg was always just head on, staying focused on what he needed to stay focused on. Our distributors, so globally, we operate through a set of standards. So every company should have standards, like rules that you have to live by. And we have those, and that allows us to systemize the business to the most part globally. It gives everybody a blueprint of understanding what the cultural behavior and rules are. And that is something that is really big in Mr. Sorg's eyes, operating with global standards. It isn't always easy because, of course, markets are different and you have to be somewhat agile to deal with that. And I think that's the other cultural piece for me. He is very agile, so he can make changes quickly and invest in those changes. And like we saw that with COVID, when it took about 3 weeks from what I had been told, from the time it's like, okay, there aren't going to be any more live meetings, which is really a big part of PM's culture. So what are we going to do? And in 3 weeks, we built an entire architecture on how we're going to run the events. And he was able to do that because he makes the decisions, the revenue's there, the team's there. So that agility allows us to be very nimble and to continue to focus on change to stay relevant and competitive in the marketplace. That's another big cultural thing to me.
Yeah, that definitely is a superpower, excuse me, of the company and of Mr. Sorg. That ability to be agile in such a structured environment, you need that structure to support the growth and support the momentum. And so oftentimes those things are in conflict, but he and the company found such an incredible way to blend those two things together. You talked about kind of that sole focus on direct selling and network marketing and really protecting the distributor's business. I know that kind of sticking to those fundamentals is an important part of the company strategy. Can you talk a little bit about what you see are those fundamentals, those kind of must-haves, those things that are sacred that you don't mess with, that really drive the kind of direct selling and network marketing side of the business?
I think the cultural side is to protect the behaviors that matter, that produce the success and impact in the business. But for me, the fundamentals have always been the same, but how their practice has evolved. So if I look at what are the fundamentals to me, getting customers. So we lead through the product door, we lead through our product brand fit line. And because of that, everything starts with getting a long-term satisfied customer. So I think that's something that never goes away. I can't imagine 10 years from now, PM is going to be like, you know what, we don't need customers anymore. And we're at a fraction of what our ultimate goal. The ultimate goal of the company is 20 million customers. And so we got a lot of work to do, even though it's been an amazing success story for 30 years. From a company perspective, they're still very early too, with obviously the Americas being a big part of that. Of course, getting customers is only the sale, the customer acquisition. It's now keeping customers. That's always the second fundamental. How do I improve retention? So I'm always looking at how do I improve the customer lifetime value, the customer lifetime stay, and ultimately paying attention to almost having a potential conversion funnel. So if I have a customer that pays retail, maybe I can give them a discount code to buy the first time. We have an auto ship program that that is a huge part of the foundation of PM. And then they can join as a team partner and even double the discount they would get on an auto ship. So I think that conversion funnel allows two things. One is our customers to stay longer. And the second is for those that potentially want a bigger discount or become business builders, which is probably the more likely scenario at PM. We have a road for them too.
That's great. I love that you started with customer as the initial fundamental element of network marketing and of direct selling. Not everyone's going to start there as they're discussing their business model, but I think that speaks a lot to the company and how they approach it, and the fact that they've had such an incredible foundation of customers to be able to build and sustain that growth over the 30 years. I think that says so much.
And I just want to mention something on that real quick. I have never understood that thinking in network marketing. I mean, the simple reality is the only way the business model works is if the consumer side works. Unless I'm missing something, all revenue is driven by sales of a product or a service. So it makes sense to me, the more sales I have and the more repeat sales I have, the more I can build the business around it. And I've kind of found over the years, many examples where recruiting without paying attention to the relationship part after that tends out to be a cliff that you have to, that you go over at some point. Sure. And then, I don't know if you know who Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, but he has a famous saying with startups that startups like jumping off a cliff and hoping you can build an airplane before you hit the ground. Right. I think approaching the business solely from a recruiting standpoint and not paying attention to how you build long-term engaged relationships is a mistake that a lot of companies make. If you have the consumer part right, it's really easy to build the business part out. And I've always seen the business that way. And to be honest with you, even prior to PM, my focus was always on strengthening the sales of the products.
I agree 100%. Thank you so much for highlighting that. That is, I'm glad that whoever's listening is going to be able to go back and listen to that and understand that that is the foundation, the entry point for building a successful business. Even though our focus is supporting the field is ultimately going to be providing value to customers. And so thank you for highlighting that.
It's also the default position for a team builder. So what I've learned over the years is not everybody stays on the business journey. So people come and go. A lot of times they find their way back. They don't leave, they drift is what I've kind of found. But at the end of the day, it does matter that when somebody leaves, they are such a lover of the product, they stay on the product. And I would say, especially any legacy company, go look at your database and compare those that have left, those that have stayed, and then ask yourself, are you doing anything to resurrect or re-engage those people? Because people drift. I had one company I did a study for, Wayne. We looked at auto ships, and when they got canceled, what happened? And the reality was the company wasn't doing anything, just they're gone, done. And we found out that 19% of their sales were coming from those people that had left, and the average re-engagement time was 141 days. And that was with nobody doing anything. So I think a huge opportunity is to sometimes recognize people do drift and just stripping and staying in touch with people. And the best way to do it is to keep them on the product. If they stay on the product, there's always an opportunity for another possibility, another conversation. So I think that's always my default with any team partner, was make sure they're a lifelong happy customer.
I love that. It is those that have been with us, whether as a customer or as distributor, that group, that list is such an incredible asset that often goes unleveraged or not really leveraged to its full extent. And to your point, even some simple campaigns can reduce that re-engagement time. There's so much we can do there from a CRM standpoint. So I hope we all go back and look at those and dust off those lists and realize what important, valuable assets those people are.
It's incredible. I had one company I work with in consulting that 40%, they were $1 billion company, 40% of their sales were coming from re-engaging people.
Wow.
So it can have a profound impact. So I would say on the other fundamentals, obviously building a team. You always want more people selling your products. So gaining distributors is always important. But I think keeping them engaged is the key. So a distributor that is engaged isn't doing anything. So you want to always focus on engagement, keeping them in movement. And that is something PM and Mr. Sork are masterful at, is constantly keeping things in movement. I think the other one, especially today, is enhancing visibility. I think, for PM, when I came here, the first thing I told Mr. Sorg was, you might be the best kept secret in the marketplace. Like, nobody knows who PM is in the States. Obviously, they do in Europe and they do in the Asia Pacific regions, but not really here. But then, we start creating visibility. Of course, DSN has been very helpful in that. My first year, we were number 8 on the DSN list. This year, we were number 6. And then on top of that, Mr. Sorg got the Leadership Award. We've won the Bravo Award 4 years in a row, never been done twice. So all this visibility helps people see the value of PM as a business. But I would say we even get more visibility on the product side. So one of the uniquenesses of Fitline is it is a separate brand of PM. So when we talk about product, we only talk about Fitline. PM is more the business side. So with that, we do so much to create brand visibility around our product, giving marketing collateral to our field to be able to go out and talk to people about our products. And then the last one for me is you always have to have a DNA of innovation. At the end of the day, change is happening faster now than at any time in history. I remember a couple of years ago when I was on the advisory council at Wake Forest University for their entrepreneur program, and I got to meet one of the co-CEOs of Oracle. And he told me something I never forgot. He asked me a question: how much change do you think has happened in the last 2 years? And I said, I really don't know. And he goes, there's more documentation in the last 2 years than what has been documented in the history of the world. And now when you look at the estimates of the speed of change, it is astronomically going to get faster and faster. And now, especially with technology, AI, you're seeing all these other things, e-commerce. So I think having a DNA of innovation is really important, and having the ability to invest in into that DNA of innovation. So those are my main things that I've always focused on, and I think they're all very strong here at PM.
Those are great fundamentals. I hope everybody goes back and listens to those and writes those down. If we are able to check the box on those as we develop our strategy and roll it out, then we know we're going to be successful if we can continue to hit those. So one of the things I do, or the elements that you talked about, that I want to circle back on here is engagement, especially related to field engagement. This is something Mr. Sorg talks a lot about. This is something I know that's been very important to you. And I was even reading in a recent DSN article where you were kind of discussing this topic. So I'm curious, as you approach the field, the team members there in the US market, how are you ensuring that they're staying in that high performance mode and not letting them slide into more of a maintenance mode? What have you seen work?
Well, I would say first and foremost, so engagement, simple rule, discipline is correlated to what's important to the individual. So at the end of the day, if the products are important, they'll take them. If the business is important, they'll work it. So one of the things that we're always doing is stressing the importance of the business, the impact we have, the timing we have. And so that sort of becomes the inspirational component of business. But there's a really famous formula for engagement, a behavioral formula that reads, engagement is a triumph of hope over experience. Now, if you look at that formula, and the first time I heard the formula was more in the example of a marriage. So like, how many of you have bad experiences in a marriage, but why do you stay married? Because you have hope it's going to get better. So it's only a two variable formula. And what's interesting is if you ask people, and I've done this in front of large rooms and in corporate boardrooms, hope and experience, which one matters the most? And most people in network marketing would tell me hope. But the reality is hope is just your belief system about the future. Where does it come from? Experiences. So we're in the experience game. And the 5 things we always focus on with experience is positive, meaningful. So the more emotional connection and repetition something has, the more meaningful it is to somebody from a behavioral perspective. I think there's just an interesting neuroscience article on this I read this weekend where they were actually able to map all that out. It's kind of fascinating. A great experience creates hope. So imagine somebody coming to a first meeting about the products and they see something like, wow, that product could begin to help me with whatever it is they're looking, whatever they desire that they don't have. But here's the interesting thing, and I think this is where network marketing has created some challenges with its reputation. Hope is a beggar. You have to confirm hope. An experience might create it, but it is the future experiences that we either take it away or make it stronger. So a lot of times this is where you have to really pay attention in the trenches to where people are having bad experiences or how to improve the experiences they're having. So, and then of course, the last piece of the experience game is if you do that, you can magnify hope into faith. And the difference is that faith can't be destroyed by an experience. So it's a stronger connection. It's almost like your purpose is behind something. So everything evolves around those principles. You know, every time we have, like last year, our World Management Congress, we had 16,000 people, all leaders there live. We had another 250,000 plus online. And all the conversations were every little detail of how to make the experience magical. And I think that's a lot of the architecture of PM. The details are what amplify the experience, and our job is to provide world-class experiences. And I don't know of any company, including PM, that doesn't have the ability to do better at that. But I think it goes back to me, a fundamental rule of business. I think all business is about experiences. If people have good experiences with you, they'll continue to want a relationship with you. If they don't, there's other choices out in the marketplace. If you look at the team partners, our distributors, that's a volunteer army. At any time, there's an entire world of opportunities out there that they could choose. So we have to earn their business here. And that's kind of the approach that we've kept at PM and that Mr. Sorg has had literally since the beginning of the company.
That focus on experiences is so important. And I think as businesses, we often think about experiences in terms of these kind of large, grand experiences. Yet every single interaction, every single touch point that someone has with a product, a company, a brand is an experience. And it's an opportunity to either kind of surprise and delight and reinforce a positive brand or create a negative experience. And so I do think it's vital to continually kind of audit those different important experience touch points and make sure that they are up to par and providing wonderful experiences and not creating these negative ones. Because I'm sure there are so many that we don't even realize where we're creating friction. We're not providing value in the right way. So I love that focus on experiences. And relating to that, I know one of the really important elements for PM International around experiences is their events. We know that this is a really important part of the channel, of managing a field and inspiring a field, but yet PM International has done it in a really interesting way. It's been a big part of their strategy and their calendar. My understanding, it's a pretty aggressive, I'm going to use that term in quotes, but a pretty aggressive event schedule throughout the month and throughout the year. So while some companies are trying to reduce their event schedule and those in-person events, it's such a huge part of the strategy and important experience for the PM distributors. Can you talk a little bit about how you in the US and PM International approaches events and the strategy behind them?
Yeah, I mean, events have always been a foundational part of our industry and certainly a big part of PM's success story. Ultimately, we are a big believer in live events. I know other companies have moved more in the hybrid or virtual space. We also do that, but for the most part, you can't create connection as well online as you can belly to belly, and that is a foundational part of direct selling. I think events do that. I think they amplify the experience. So the other part of kind of the event structure is, you're right, there's never something that isn't going on. If you remember, I told you momentum is about movement. So there's always movement. There's always multiple things going on. There's never a month, 2 months, 2 weeks where there's a gap. It's just always in movement. And I think that's why the event culture works. I think the fact that we are doing a lot of large global live events is a big part of it. Now, so events are broken down. They can be local, they could be regional, they could be by country, and then we have global events. So, we have our biggest conference is the one coming up next month, our World Management Congress. It's in Berlin this year. We have a massive leadership event that is in December. We have business academies every month. We have product academies 3 or 4 times a year. So there's an architecture to this because, and this is just my belief, the more structured you have something, the more people understand what's going on. I think you always want to have something in front of people so they're planning and getting ready for things. And this is the other thing that kind of interesting with our events. For the global events, you have to qualify to go. This goes back to a high performance issue. If you want a seat at the table, if you want to be involved, you have to be building. We're not like some companies looking at how do we potentially get rid of legacy leaders. Quite the opposite. That's never been Mr. Sort's philosophy. But it is very much about, if you want to be at the events, you have to qualify for the events. It doesn't matter what level you're at. If you're not qualified, you're not going. And so this is an interesting situation that other companies might be dealing with, because this wasn't hard to follow because it's always been this way. But when you take a culture that isn't that way and that has gone political, and now you're trying to make a shift that way, that's a tough road, a very, very tough road. But anybody, and this I think goes back to what I talked about earlier, a lot of the executives that have not been in our channel, they sort of, I call it spreadsheet management. So they'll look at something and they'll look at an event and they'll be like, why would he spend $2 million for this event? We can just do it online. Because they don't understand the importance of culture and community and connecting. It's even on the corporate side. So at PM, we're required to go to work. We do not operate virtually. But I had a really interesting conversation at the DSN January event, and there was a discussion about virtual corporate. And I would say that I was the minority in the room. Most people were like, everything's going virtual. That's where the world's going. That was like 9 of them were in that camp and just couldn't stop talking about this the way it was going. Meanwhile, their company shutting down operations, their campus is empty, not a good thing. So they asked, what does PM do? And I said, we're required to go to work. How do we build culture without having people together? It's just not about the field. It's about how the corporation works too. And then the debate went on, and I finally asked, well, let me ask you this question. For all of you that have gone virtual, who's growing in sales? That pretty much put an end to the conversation. So I think, any company has to look at, relationships and connection are built better when you're with people than just online with people. And I'm not against online. I'm actually a big proponent of the social and digital world. But in our industry, it really matters to network and to be with people. I think it's foundational. And the word I always use is connection. So if you think about connection as just 3 words: trust, care, and help. Where is it better to gain trust? When I'm with people all the time. What about caring? I'm with them. I can hear them. I can listen. It's a different environment, and I can help them in many other ways. So to me, investing in connection is how you invest in relationships. And when you invest in relationships, you'll create engagement, and everything kind of grows from there. But that's always been the PM way, even though we have a massive leadership culture. And growing. We still don't have anybody at our top level of a marketing plan, if you can imagine that. But yeah, that's what I would say about our event culture. And then a lot of our events, the other thing is the incentives.
Yeah,
so
please.
Incentives play a big part in things. I think it's consumer behavior 101, at least in the US. When do people buy? When you give them a reason to buy. And knowing that, we use a lot of incentives, whether they're global incentives, whether they're flash sales that I might be doing in my markets. There's various strategies behind how you use incentives, but they're a huge driver of our business. And I look at it as a consumer. Every time I go to buy something, I'm like, okay, what's on sale? When's it? It's just how we're programmed.
Sure.
So I think when you don't have that, then you're trying to sell retail to an entire world that doesn't sort of adapt to that kind of thinking in the world we live in today.
If you missed any part of the Spring DSU event or just want to revisit some of the speakers and topics, replays are accessible in the DSU On-Demand Library. The library is an exclusive resource for DSN supporter companies, one of many benefits designed to help keep you and your teams engaged, informed, and one step ahead. If you work at a supporter company, simply log in using your unique company code to access this event's content, plus over 250 presentations from previous educational events. If you are interested in becoming a DSN supporter, you can contact us at support@directsellingnews.com. We also invite you to join us at the Fall DSU event happening September 23rd through 25th at the Irving Convention Center in Irving, Texas. Registration is free. Visit dsnevents.com today.
Oftentimes companies are maybe a little shy to talk about the inherent premium pricing that's in the channel for most companies. Yet PM really does talk very loudly about pricing and promotions and discounts, and has a really cool cadence. I'm curious, is that kind of promotional calendar, promotional strategy, is that global and everyone kind of is doing incentives at the same time? As a leader of sales for a market, do you have the ability to pull a promotional lever when needed? How does the company approach kind of the global nature of these pricing incentives?
Yeah, so we have global incentives. So there's 2 lanes for the incentives. One is product incentives, which is the bigger lane for us. And the other is more the business incentives, like incentives to go to our events and things of that nature. I would say globally, we all operate under the same rules, but in my market, I have flexibility within those rules to run certain specials, to do flash sales. That was a concept I brought into PM in August of 2022 that's been really, really successful. So it's a little bit of both. But ultimately, I think the incentives will continue to play a part. We will still stay within the global structure. But yes, we do have flexibility as long as it's proved.
So one question around pricing incentives and promotions, if they do come at a certain cadence or frequency, oftentimes, and maybe this just relates more to the field, but oftentimes you start conditioning buyers to buy at certain times and to expect these promotions. How do you avoid this in the US market? Is this something that is more kind of field facing and not necessarily customer facing? So it allows the team members to then go to their customers and say, hey, there's this great promotion to try to, incentivize a purchase kind of in the short term. How do you handle or kind of balance the cadence of promotions with not conditioning people to buy only during those times?
So I would say that we're very big on promotions and promoting promotions. So we do a lot of communication around our incentives. We don't force buying, but we know if the business is in momentum and people are engaged, then offering more incentives doesn't affect that because they're always in movement. So they're going to be buying more product, consuming more product, selling more product, whatever that might be. I think if you don't have the momentum, then it's a different challenge because you might have, for instance, a customer that you run a special twice a year, and that's when they buy their product because they're just really wholesale buyers. But ultimately, the cadence, the architecture of our incentives is part of the success system that has been there from the beginning. I've never really had any conversation where it was like tempering the purchasing of products or the sale of products. If anything, it's the exact opposite. We're always trying to provide more incentives to drive more engagement.
That's great. And I've also talked to people there where they have seen that it just becomes incremental, that customers and people are kind of purchasing, Fitline, like their main products, and how the promotions are done, especially on the product side, induce trial, induce kind of AOV, increasing AOV and LTV and things like that. So I think the company has done it in such a smart and incredible way.
And I think this goes back to something I said earlier, events and incentives. That is the success system is built around those two core things. And the architecture of that has been in place for years. It is always evolving, but it is not completely changing by any means. And probably the greatest example of the consumer incentives is our biggest month every year is December. And
That's incredible. Yeah.
I always joke around. I think most network marketers think December is an entire month off. But we start running heavy incentives on Black Friday through Cyber Monday. And it's the biggest every year. It's our biggest month. And then we just carry the momentum from there. So we don't really have a down month because we're always in movement.
Yeah.
And if anybody's listening, I think that's a great question you have to ask yourself is, are you keeping people in movement? Because if there's gaps, there's probably gaps in engagement. So you have to kind of figure out how to always inspire movement and to keep that going. And these are just events and incentives or ways that we do that.
Absolutely. It is such an incredible way to keep that going. Again, filling those gaps and keeping the momentum back to kind of that high performance. I know that that's something that Mr. Sorg and the company continues to look at, identifying where those opportunities are. It might be seasonal, it might even be kind of on a weekly basis, but identifying where those opportunities to keep the performance high and the momentum going is so vital and such an important characteristic of the company. So I'm curious, as the head of sales there for the Americas, obviously that's not the home market. So what have you learned kind of in being, I'll call it, out in the field or in an international market? What have you learned about how corporate can effectively stay aligned, or a market can stay aligned with corporate? How can those two things stay aligned effectively? What have you seen work really well there?
Well, I will say this, 2 years in, I'm still learning a lot. There's a lot going on, but I think when it comes to alignment, everybody understands the business architecture of PM. So alignment isn't really a difficult thing for us. People know what's expected of them. And that's where the focus remains. So I don't see a lot of challenges. Now, saying that, I've never been in a business where I've dealt with more foreign leadership and foreign distributor base. That brings some interesting challenges in when you have multiple languages and translation going on, and events could have multiple languages in it. So that's been a new challenge for me in my career, but we seem to be navigating those waters pretty well. I would say that in some respects, I think it might be a blessing we don't have an established Anglo market. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, I'm one of them. But I found over the years, when I look at the market and I look at some of the things that are going on right now, they seem to have a lot of target on the Anglo leadership, whether it's the legacy leaders, and it seems to always be around the same conversations. One being kind of like, what have you done for me lately? Like, you need to be building, you need to be growing. And, the promise of network marketing is not a new promise. It's the promise of building something and having potentially passive income. I call it relationship income because I don't think anything's passive about it. That was the promise. But, you look at the current situation in the industry. Yes, it was a promise, but if your sales are dropping, you're constantly cutting expenses to survive. At some point, you're going to look at your payouts because emissions are a major part of the P&L of any network marketing company. At one point, I can remember when the target was about 50% of sales would be going to commissions. And I think it's more around 35% because operational costs have skyrocketed since about 2016. Like, perfect example is technology. I mean, we did a study of the DSA in 2016 where 2% of the sales was going to tech. We did one, I think it was the fall of 2022, and that went up to 8%, and the bigger companies were doing 13 to 18%. 10 years ago, all operations weren't even 15%. So there is a reality to things, and that's when every time I'm talking to leaders, this is what I try to get them to understand. At the end of the day, a company has to be profitable to survive. It's just that simple. If revenues are declining, then profitability becomes at risk. So what do? They start right-sizing. They start cutting expenses. And to me, when you start going down that slope, you have to recognize something a key important element. If you don't turn around sales, you can't make that strategy work. You can't cut forever. At some point, there's nothing left to cut. So what you want to do is keep investing into the growth. You want to keep investing into the revenue side of things. And I find today that is a rare thing. I'm finding more and more companies really struggling to understand that. But I think it's really, really important that you understand that if you want a solid long-term company, focus on growth. There is no other path to stability. I don't care who you are.
Absolutely. I want to stay on this for just a couple more minutes. So you've talked about some of the changes that are happening, obviously from a cost structure around operations, potential legacy leaders now a few decades in for some companies or even more. What are some of the other really important changes that you're seeing in the direct selling landscape, and even as it relates to kind of today's brand partners, specifically in the US market? What are some of the main changes you're seeing?
Well, I think there's a couple. So off the top of my head, one that jumps out at me is we're seeing a demographic shift. So, you're at a place where, as long as I've been looking at the data, the average age for your distributor base in the US was about 46. We're starting to see that drop. In the last 4 years, we've seen it at PM drop multiple percentage points to a younger generation. So I think that brings an interesting challenge in for companies when your future depends on the leadership that you're building. Your junior leaders tend to be the momentum drivers. Matter of fact, I would venture to say if you took customers, your retailers, and your leaders with a small team and a small customer base, they generally represent between 70 to 96% of sales, customer acquisition, and recruiting. So that's your base that you have to build. So I think when you build that base and you focus on that, things just become much, much easier. But when you don't, then the decline starts. So I think one of the reasons you're seeing a lot of conversations about affiliate models, for instance, that's a trend that we're hearing. But affiliates is just paying the person that sells your product. It's nothing really more than that. And I guess the question I always wonder when I hear companies move in this direction, why are you moving that direction? Does your compensation plan not properly compensate them? Is it that you're not out retailing products, that you're just building through the business builder side? Because I think at the end of the day, boy, it just really, really matters to stay focused on that product side. And and retailing is an important part. You know, I think it was Dan Jensen that did a study that asked how much money does somebody have to make to stay in our industry, and it was $300 to $500. He called it the golden handcuffs. And I will tell you, any company that a part-time person just retailing products, not building, if they can make that kind of money, then you have a stable base. If not, you're finding companies moving one of two directions. One is we're going affiliate, maybe one of three. You have some companies that have completely got out of direct selling and went more of an e-commerce route. Even some in the retail space. You have some who are moving to an affiliate model, and we're just almost like a one-generation plan. Some moving to a super affiliate where it's just a two-level plan. But you're also seeing companies now looking at their compensation plan saying, number one, what's our max payout we can pay out? Because there's only a certain amount you can pay to be profitable. I believe that's probably about 35% in our industry today. But if you've been paying out 50% or more, and you have to come down to that level, then the question becomes, where's that money coming from? And I think that's, as things have you seen a decline in revenue, there's a more focus on where is productivity coming and how do we invest in productivity and how do we avoid paying out just millions and millions of dollars to people that aren't being productive, even though that was the promise of network marketing. And I think that's just a part of the world we live in network marketing and direct selling today. Certainly technology has completely shifted. You know, if you go back to even, I would say 2014, 2015, technology was built on what they call monolithic systems, the idea that everything lives in one place. Now technology lives in a decoupled architecture where you have like this central engine that, for like direct selling, might hold their order data, their distributor data, their commission data, things like that. But what you do is you attach things to it. And probably the biggest example of this is Shopify. Yeah. You know, I know my son gets a ton of work with Shopify for direct selling companies. And why does it work? Because it's a simple e-commerce platform that has just probably over 3,000 plugins. Yeah, it makes business pretty easy. So I think you're seeing a lot of companies struggling with transitioning from a monolithic system to a decoupled architecture. It's not always an easy transition. There's a lot of complexity in that, but ultimately, with the speed of tech change, you have to be agile. You have to build a system. And so technology is a big factor that everybody's looking at. I think trying to figure out how to drive sales and the relationship piece in the social and digital world has become a big focus. In my opinion, maybe it's shifted a little too much on the field side where people are sort of like automating campaigns in Facebook and doing all these other things, but not investing into the relationship piece that really makes direct selling work. So I think there's a lot of factors that are being looked at right now to try to figure out what does the future look like. But for PM, the future always looks the same. We want more customers and we want more team partners, getting more customers and more team partners. We want to stay committed to product quality. And I would say, you know, for Mr. Sorg, it's not product quality, it's product obsession. He is so obsessed about quality. It's unbelievable. And then I think just staying in that innovation lane and really making sure you don't get too far behind, because catching up is really a challenge. And I think if you were talking to most of the companies in the industry, I think you would realize they're trying to figure out how they turn things around. Sadly, I think a lot of them are looking at the wrong answers. They think there's some magic dust they can sprinkle and solve all their problems. And in reality, it's always about fundamentals. So if you practice the fundamentals in a competitive and relevant way, I think then the future will be kind to you. If you don't, I think you might find you're going to get a little bit farther behind every day.
Absolutely. And it says so much that as you were just discussing kind of the future growth strategy, you were able to do it in such a simple, not easy, but simple and succinct way into, just a few or several key elements. Oftentimes, we overcomplicate and muddy, and we don't know which way to run. So again, that says a lot about the structure and the discipline of the company that you're able to distill it down in such a simple way.
And wait, that's part of our
Yeah,
philosophy.
please.
Simple and successful. So part of the experience game is how do we make everything simple so the experiences are more positive and meaningful to people? And I actually think that that's harder to do than what people think.
Oh, it is.
Simple isn't always simple to achieve, especially when you have a diverse distributor base and all these moving parts and different products. But ultimately, complexity is the enemy of execution. So if I make things complex and then I look at it from the field perspective, knowing how many seasoned entrepreneurs do we bring into direct selling, I would say most are not seasoned entrepreneurs, which means complexity will literally stop them in their tracks. And I think it has a lot to do with how long people stay engaged and if they're building, and that simplicity is throughout their journey. And I think if it isn't, if there's complexity, that's something any company should be looking at to kind of turn the other direction. And part of that, by the way, and this is another important cultural piece for PM, we are very collaborative with the field. PM has never been what I would call an operational takeover, where operations knows better than the salespeople. In Mr. Sorg collaborates. We have programs that only leaders that are building can come in for, like a lot of really good stuff around getting input from our field, understanding the world from their eyes, and then understanding our job is to support that to the best of our abilities. Where I think a lot of the traditional management that we're starting to see, I think sees it from the other direction. Yeah. I think they kind of look at it and it's more transactional versus people-centric. And eventually they got the cultures, and I've seen that. And then, what do you end up with? Probably a sale of your company, a merger into another company, a selling off of regions, all the things we're starting to see these days. But for PM, it's just rock solid, stay the course, innovate when we need to, and it's worked for 30 years.
I love that. There's so much in what you just said. And I just want to echo and agree on the importance of simplicity. It's often overlooked. We all go through the quarterly and annual planning process. And how many times have we come to the end of that process and there's a 90-page deck on what the go forward strategy is, but to be able to, again, to distill it down to something simple takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of discipline, but ultimately that's what's going to allow a company to grow and scale. And I know that that's been such an important part with how Mr. Sorg manages, that he's able to distill things down into its key components. Yeah. And focus and align the organization.
And I would say the other thing with that, Wayne, is that I would say Mr. Sorg is very smart in how he manages change, because I think when things start going the wrong direction, some people start, well, let's change these 10 things. And the more things you change, the more complexity and confusion you create in the marketplace. So I think part of it is a strategy of knowing how to manage change effectively to keep engagement. And he has been very masterful at that. And I think a big part of that is the financial management of the company, debt-free, incredible EBITDA. So those pieces are there too. I find it interesting that even some of the public companies that have been around for decades are still borrowing money to run their business. I mean, at some point, I think your business should be self-sustaining. It should be able to carry itself. And that's certainly PM's story. We have no debt. We have no equity investors. We do have some of our senior leaders are allowed to be small partners in the business. So that's another incentive for our big leaders, what we call our Champions League. So yeah, a lot of good things.
That's amazing. I just want to circle back on a couple of things. You talked about one around the importance of flexibility and modularity as it relates to technology. It was so refreshing at this past DSU to hear a number of companies finally shifting to a Shopify a Shopify platform or more flexible e-commerce platforms, that is going to be so important going forward to be able to take these tools, just plug them in at a relatively low cost. We do have expenses rising at other places, but over the long term, as it relates to e-commerce, I've actually seen it be a cost savings. Moving to these, not having the cost and the technical debt of transporting these platforms we have and these systems we've built to all the other markets. The other really interesting thing is around the kind of demographic shift that you spoke about. I know for me, multiple companies I've been at, one of the important conversations were, how do we attract the younger generation into direct selling? We knew the importance of this. We knew that our current leaders were kind of quote unquote aging out a little bit. And then this demographic shift has happened and we kind of got what we wanted. And it was almost like we were unprepared. Even though we wanted it for so long, we weren't ready for the different drivers and the different approaches that this generation finds important and in how they operate. And so it's really interesting now in our company seeing this tension between some of these legacy leaders and what they want and their drivers are, and this kind of younger group that we know is going to fuel the future and kind of what they want. And I know that that's something that many of us are kind of wrestling with and trying to figure out. You talked a little bit on the growth and that really important inflection point. You mentioned it took 26 years to reach the first $1 billion in revenue, but it only took 2 years to reach that second $1 billion. And so I know that the company has a goal to achieve $5 billion in revenue by 2027. So what are some of the things that you're doing from the US market perspective to support this growth goal and keep the momentum going?
So the first strategy for me was brand visibility. As I mentioned earlier, I felt that nobody knew PM or Fitline. So the more visibility we get, the better. And that can come corporately through third parties, through stuff we put out in the marketplace, but it can also in creating marketing collateral for your field. So, and that marketing collateral is really just to open up conversation. So if we put something out like why PM, why now would be an example. If that was a tool or something we gave the field and they shared it with somebody, then it allows them to open up that conversation. So I think that brand visibility was number one. The second was, for me, was scalability. So I'm more, I would say, sales operations than sales. So a lot of times when you're building something in the early stages, a lot of it is not really process or systems driven. Obviously, globally it is, but here it's a little bit different. Have really worked hard on systemizing things, really mapping things out so that we could scale it. I think it's really hard to scale tribal knowledge that lives in people's heads, and it's different in everybody's head, and that creates a problem. We have continued to add more products and improve the products we have, which I think has been a big strategy. And then I also think a big part of my strategy here was building the right team around me. So my sales director team, they needed to be diverse, speak different languages, have different experiences, because our culture is so different than anything I worked with in the past. So you have to build a team that can support that. So in the last 2 years since I've been here, we've had steady growth year over year, literally every month. Auto ship growth at about 35% a year, like clockwork. So we're kind of doing results that a lot of people in the industry aren't doing. I personally think that although we're growing quickly, I think we can grow faster as we get more of the fundamentals in place. And then that brings me to the last piece, which is it always goes back to how do we better support the field? Where do we find simplicity? Where do we improve the experiences? What can we do with tech to help? How can we help with translation? Like all this becomes a constant focus for improvement. So, when I came here, it wasn't anything different than what I've done my whole life, which is those things, and then focusing on the fundamentals. The fundamentals are the fundamentals. They're practice different, but they don't go away. Nobody's going to convince me there's a time where you don't want any more customers, but how you get customers today. I remember my old partner, when he was building, he built his business through classified ads. I don't even know if there's classified ads out there anymore. I don't know much about that world, but can you imagine today trying to build the way you built 20 years ago to get a customer, to recruit a distributor? So, it's just different. So you always have to study the marketplace to see where are the trends that can help us improve the strength of our business. And, we're always looking at those, always sort of studying things. We're very data driven. I would say we have a healthy combination of we've always done it that way and we need to make a change. So,
That's great.
managing those two things is definitely an art form. I will say that.
Oh, absolutely. So you've been very generous with your time, and I'm getting to the last couple of questions. And these are some of my favorite ones that I always love at the end of some of the conversations here. But over the last few years there, what do you feel have been, one of the top one or two most important leadership lessons that you've learned at PM?
First of all, for me, lead by example. I think leadership has the word lead in it. There should be a clue there. And that includes even a senior level executive like me. I'm getting customers for the company. I'm out recruiting my network for the company because as a leader, I have to lead what I would call a revenue focused approach to the business. I have learned how much quality products make a difference in retention and engagement. I always kind of knew that, especially with my past with Juice Plus, who have had an amazing product, what Juice Plus still does. But to see how the products are done here, how they're iterated, how we keep adding technologies, and it keeps things fresh and exciting. So there's not really that product cycle of doing something for 10 or 15 years. And it's like, oh, well, we've been doing this forever. So it's always fresh and exciting. I would say a big lesson for me is I've never been more convinced of the future of network marketing. And that might seem like a very strange comment with everything that's going on right now. But if anything, I think PM's story is a testament to that. Direct selling and network are alive and well. There is unbelievable potential down the road if you are doing what's necessary to be competitive in the marketplace. If you're not, then I think you have a challenging road ahead of you. But I look at PM, and most people could look at our story and be like, wow, I'm just waiting for you guys to turn the other way. Sales to go the other way. I don't even see that happening here. Even when things are growing, it's always, how do we get him to grow faster? So that's just the culture of PM. So I think those were big ones. And I guess the other one is, and this goes back to Mr. Sorg, I think everything comes down to whoever the ultimate decision maker is. And having somebody who founded a company, who was a successful distributor, who has went through all the growing pains of building a successful company, to have that at the helm and to be just solely committed to the principles of the culture, to the obsession about quality products, to staying competitive in the marketplace, all this speaks of his leadership. And I think, PM is PM because of Rolf Sorg. And I always knew that the ultimate decision maker made a difference. I didn't realize how much of a difference it made. And although he's collaborative, the business isn't run through committees. At the end of the day, somebody has to make a decision, and he's that somebody. And even if we are given objectives or outcomes that we have to perform, he's still there working with us. Even though we're responsible for boosting, he's trying to help. He's trying to add global initiatives and programs in to help us. So I think it really speaks volumes for whoever's running your company will likely determine your future. And PM is blessed to have Rolf Sorg running their company because he is a leader of leaders. He is unlike anybody else I've met in the industry. And the crazy thing is, he just had his 60th birthday. We did a big party in Vegas last November. He's so committed to the future of the business. He's a young 60 who has so much more drive in him. And I think when people see that, it inspires them to see the potential of the future. And, we believe the future is bigger. And for the Americas, there's no place in PM that has a bigger upside than the Americas. So for me, I'm excited to have that opportunity to build and to turn the Americas into the talk of PM also. But we're getting there slowly but surely.
Absolutely. It is such an exciting time for PM in the US market, for PM globally. And I agree with what you said moments ago for the entire direct selling channel. So we would love to congratulate Mr. Sorg and the entire PM family on the incredible success. We're going to continue to root all the way through 2027 to hit that 5 billion goal. We know you're going to do it, but thank you for being an inspiration to all of us here in the channel. Gordon, thank you for sharing these incredible insights. I know that I've learned a lot and that we're all going to take a lot away. So please give our best back to everybody at the home office. And thank you so much for your time today.
Will do. And thank you for having me on. And hey, it's a great industry. Let's all just keep making it better. I appreciate everything DSN and DSU do. And Stuart, you guys are amazing advocates for our channel. And I love having the opportunity to work with all of you. So we just keep it moving.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gordon. Have a great day.
Thanks, Wayne. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. Please take a moment to subscribe and give a 5-star rating and review to help Direct Approach continue to provide more candid insights and interviews for direct selling corporate executives. And don't forget to register for the Fall DSU at dsnevents.com. Secure your spot now. Thank you for listening and supporting DSN and the Direct Approach podcast.